Welcome back to the Ancient Worlds podcast. We're going to make a longer talk now, reflecting on the last part of the Purgatory, the earthly paradise. It's one of the most interesting and also most intense and dramatic parts of the whole comedy. So, of the three books, the Purgatory is the second book, and then the last 6 cantos, it's 33 in total in the second book. The last 6 ones are the Garden of Eden or the earthly paradise. And this is, the Mount Purgatory is in 3 parts. They come out of the mountain, on the lower side of the mountain from the Inferno. They've gone through the whole, climbed through the earth. They emerge and out on the side, on the shore, and then they go through Ante-Purgatory, which is the pre-Purgatory. Then they climb the main part, which is 7 terraces of the 7 sins with their punishments and atonements. And then they go through the fire and then into the Garden of Eden. And we will start with when he enters for the first time in Canto 28. One of his impressions is, "My forehead felt the stirring of sweet air, whose flowing rhythm always stayed the same, and struck no harder than the gentlest breeze. And in the constant moving air, each branch with trembling leaves was bending to one side, toward where the holy mountain first casts its shade." So this is his physical experience of coming into the earthly paradise with a little breeze, which is explained by the first person he meets, which is a solitary lady wandering there. She was singing as she gathered flowers from the abundance painted on her path. So she explains that the Garden of Eden is so far above the earth, so there's no weather systems up there, but it's still a part of the moving planet. So there's constantly a little bit of a breeze to one side that he feels on his forehead, and you can see it on the leaves. So the main part of this Canto 28 is to enter into the garden, meeting Matilda, and then also he learns about the 2 rivers of Lethe and Eunoe. So Lethe is the river that will erase all your memories of your sins. And then the next one, Eunoe, at the end of it, will restore all your memories of the good in life. And through those rivers, you are then prepared for the final ascent. So this is the 28th canto. And then the 29th, then you have a big pageant, like a procession coming. So Dante is standing on one side of the river Lethe. On the other side, first is Matilda, and then this huge procession is coming. And the procession is a symbol of the Christian faith, the Catholic faith, and the church. So what he sees first is 7 candlesticks coming, then 24 elders walking in pairs. Then you have 4 creatures around a chariot, and in front of the chariot is a griffin. On the right side of the chariot you have 3 ladies, and on the left side you have 4 ladies. And then behind the chariot you have 7 men. First 2, and then 4, and then 1 lone at the end. And these different parts of the pageant represents different parts of the religion. So the 7 candlesticks is the 7 gifts of the Spirit, with wisdom, understanding, counsel, might, knowledge, piety, and fear of the Lord. The 24 elders represent the books of the Old Testament for the Hebrew Bible. The 4 creatures are the 4 Gospels, and the chariot between them is the church. And then the griffin is a mythological animal, which is a mixture of an eagle and a lion. So the eagle is the king of the skies, and the lion is the king of the earth. And then the mix of these 2 animals is then a symbol of the dual nature of Christ in the Catholic faith. He represents both the divine and the human. And then you have the 7 ladies. The 3 on the right side is for faith, hope, and charity, the theological virtues. On the left side you have prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance as the cardinal virtues. And then the last part with the 7 men is the 7 other books in the New Testament. And then the last one of those 7 is the Apocalypse, the Revelation. Then in next canto, canto 30, he finally meets Beatrice. And the whole scene when she's coming it's immensely beautiful, with like 100 angels creating this rain of flowers, and then she emerges. And Dante is thrilled by this, but Beatrice is very strict and very stern with him. And the point of this is that she is forcing him to make the final confession of his sins, to also have the final purification. So she is attacking him for having wasted his talents in life, and that he was so talented and gifted as a young person, but then he threw it all away. And then Dante is more and more, he's breaking down more and more, and finally he just completely succumbs and says, yes, I regret my sins. And then he faints. And when he wakes up, he's being pulled through the river, the Lethe River, by Matilda, as symbolic for going through the purging of his emotional memory of the sins. And then on the 32nd, he's then at the other side now, and then the pageant leaves. It's only, we have but the tree of the knowledge with the 7 maidens and the chariot. And this whole canto is dedicated to the history of the church, with a focus on the corruption of the church. So the chariot is being attacked by an eagle. There's a monster coming up underneath it. It also transforms into a monster. And then finally there's a giant coming and taking the chariot and pulling it and leaving into the woods. It's a very strong attack from Dante on the institution of the church in the 32nd canto. And then in the final part, the 33rd, he then reaches the second river of Eunoe to go through the final cleansing. And in this part there's also a segment where Beatrice is starting to talk to him in kind of mysterious language, and he doesn't understand this. So he asks her how come that he doesn't understand what she's saying. And then she explains to him that it's because she's there to, she's a symbol of the spiritual life and the revelation in some sense. So she explains to him that she's there to teach him now the difference between the earthly and the heavenly. So when she starts talking about the heavenly, the words are just flying above him. He doesn't understand it. And then finally he goes through the cleansing with Eunoe. And then you have the connection to the beginning of the Purgatory with the renewal and rebirth. From the start, when he pulls up a reed, he has to put a reed around his waist as a symbol of humility. So when he pulls out the reed from the ground, there's a miracle, it says in the first canto, where he pulls it up and then a new one springs up immediately. So they connect it back to that scene. And then he's again, when he goes through the Eunoe, he wants to explain how it feels, but then he says, "Reader, if I had space to write more words, I'd sing at least in part of that sweet draught which never could have satisfied my thirst. But now I have completed every page planned for my poem's second canticle. I am checked by the bridle of my art." So he's talking now directly to us as readers. And summing up, like this, the second book is now finished. I don't have more space to write. And I would have liked to explain more about Eunoe, but this is the constraints of my art, like the poetry. And then the final 4 sentences. "From these holiest waters I returned, to her reborn, a tree renewed in bloom, with newborn foliage, immaculate, eager to rise, now ready for the stars." And then the second book, as all 3 books, ends with stars, which is a repetition of the number 3, and like for the Trinity, and also the 3 was a symbolic number for in the medieval times. So and stars is also there's a repetition to look up to the stars and to divinity, like the final point that he he goes on a journey towards the stars through all the 3 books and the whole work of the comedy. So that's a very brief introduction to the Garden of Eden and the 3rd part in the Purgatory. There is a tremendous there's an optimism and a joy in this as well. It's a bit rough, the last transition and transformation it goes through, but the whole Purgatory is about fixing things and getting solutions to things, and also understanding the mechanism of balancing, like the vices and the virtues. So, like, if there's too much pride in a person or in yourself, how can you balance it out? And then in this, for the pride, it's humility is how you balance it. If envy is the problem, then generosity is the virtue that you should balance it with. So there's lots of practical tips in also your personal life or like everyday life, which is helpful. And it's also very beautiful in an aesthetic sense, and with the poetry, it's a very beautiful part of the comedy. Okay, so we're going to stop there, and hope some of this was interesting. Thank you for listening, and hope you have a great day.